Most people think pregnancy discrimination lawsuits take years to resolve. But what if I told you revenge could happen overnight? Getting fired while you're on maternity leave feels like getting punched in the stomach while you're already down. That's exactly what happened to me, and honestly, I thought it was just bad luck at first. Turns out, what they did was mostly illegal in the United States. The Family and Medical Leave Act exists for a reason. It protects most new moms from being fired just for taking time off to bond with their babies. Makes sense, right? Well, companies don't always follow the rules, especially when they think nobody's watching. Here's something that might surprise you. Over 50% of women in the US return to work after maternity leave. That's millions of people trying to balance motherhood with their careers. Yet firing women during this vulnerable time happens way more often than it should. The sneaky part is how companies try to cover their tracks. They rarely come out and say, "We're firing you because you had a baby." That would be career suicide for them legally. Instead, they blame mysterious business reasons or sudden budget cuts that magically coincide with your leave. What are the odds? And here's the kicker, most people don't even hear about their firing from their actual boss. They find out through coworkers who accidentally spill the news, or worse, they discover their replacement has already been hired. The whole thing feels like a bad breakup where your partner changes their relationship status before telling you it's over. My situation started innocently enough. I was enjoying those precious first weeks with my newborn, figuring out how to function on 3 hours of sleep. Then my phone started buzzing with weird messages from colleagues. Nothing direct, just awkward. "How are you doing?" Texts that felt loaded with unspoken information. When I finally got the official call, the explanation was laughably vague. Budget constraints, they said. Restructuring, they claimed. Funny how these financial emergencies always seem to strike when women are cradling their babies instead of sitting at their desks. The timing felt suspicious, but I wasn't sure if my gut instincts were right or if new mom hormones were making me paranoid. After all, businesses do face genuine financial pressures. Sometimes layoffs happen for legitimate reasons that have nothing to do with pregnancy or maternity leave, but something didn't add up about their story. The company had been doing well before I left, landing new contracts and expanding operations. Their sudden claims of financial hardship seemed about as believable as a toddler insisting they didn't eat the cookies while chocolate crumbs covered their face. The worst part wasn't even losing the income, though that stung plenty. It was the feeling of betrayal. These were people I'd worked alongside for years, people who'd celebrated my pregnancy announcement and promised my job would be waiting when I returned. What I didn't realize yet was that this company had made a much bigger mistake than just violating employment law. They had secrets I was about to uncover, and those secrets would make my wrongful termination look like a minor offense compared to what else they were hiding. Getting fired while on maternity leave? That's where most people panic and assume they're powerless. Well, here's the thing. You're not. The law actually has your back more than you might think, but only if you know what protection you have. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act exists for exactly this reason. It makes firing someone for being pregnant or taking maternity leave straight up illegal, period. Companies can't just decide your pregnancy is inconvenient and show you the door. But here's where it gets interesting. Some states decided federal protection wasn't enough, so they created their own stronger laws. California, New York, and several others have rules that make it even harder for employers to mess with new parents. Now, let's not forget the tricky part. Not every firing during maternity leave breaks the law. Companies can still restructure, downsize, or eliminate positions as long as it's genuinely unrelated to your leave. The key word here is genuinely. If they've been planning layoffs for months and have documentation to prove it, that might be legal. Frustrating? Absolutely. But legal. The weird part is how companies try to cover their tracks. They suddenly discover performance issues that never existed before. Your glowing reviews from last quarter? Gone. Replaced with criticism that appeared right after you announced your pregnancy. One day you're Employee of the Month, the next you're apparently incompetent. Makes sense, right? Of course not. Then there are the obvious red flags that scream retaliation, demotions after pregnancy announcements, sudden schedule changes designed to make your life impossible. Exclusion from meetings you used to attend. These aren't coincidences, they're patterns, and patterns tell stories in court. But why do companies think they can get away with this? Simple, they assume new mothers won't fight back because they're overwhelmed, sleep-deprived, and dealing with a newborn. They're betting you'll just walk away quietly. Sometimes they're right. Many women do exactly that, which is why these practices continue. Well, documentation becomes your best friend in these situations. Every email, every performance review, every conversation summary matters. Courts love paper trails because they don't lie. Companies can claim whatever they want about their motivations, but emails sent at 2 a.m. complaining about your maternity leave plans tell the real story. And the surprising fact? Most employment lawyers will review wrongful termination cases for free during initial consultations. They work on contingency fees, meaning they only get paid if you win. Why? Because pregnancy discrimination cases often result in significant settlements, and lawyers know it. The Equal Employment Opportunity Commission also provides another avenue for justice. Filing complaints doesn't cost anything except your time, and they investigate these cases seriously. Companies hate EEOC investigations because they create public records and often lead to bigger problems. Knowing your rights means understanding that fighting back isn't just possible, it's often the smart financial move. But what happens when your former employer has bigger secrets than just discrimination? That's where things get really interesting. After discovering I'd been fired, I started digging into my company's business model. What I found made everything click into place like a puzzle I didn't know I was solving. My employer wasn't your typical small business struggling to make ends meet. They had something much more valuable than regular customers, a massive government contract. We're talking about the kind of deal that keeps the lights on and pays everyone's salary for years. Government contracts aren't like buying coffee from your local shop. These agreements come with more strings attached than a marionette puppet. The federal government doesn't mess around when they're spending taxpayer money. They want guarantees, documentation, and most importantly, they want the same qualified people doing the work from start to finish. Here's where things get interesting. My position wasn't just any random job. I was listed as key personnel on that contract. The government specifically approved me to handle critical parts of the project. Removing key personnel without proper justification, that's a big no-no in the contracting world. But wait, there's more. These contracts often represent anywhere from 60 to 80% of a small company's total revenue. Losing one doesn't just hurt, it can destroy a business overnight. My company was basically putting all their eggs in one very lucrative basket. The rules around government contracts are stricter than a military boarding school. When a key employee goes on maternity leave, the company can't just decide they don't want that person anymore. They need to maintain continuity. They need to show the government that the work will continue at the same quality level. Then there's the notification requirement. Most government contracts require companies to inform the contracting officer immediately when key personnel changes occur. Companies must provide detailed explanations and often need approval before making replacements. It's not a fire first, ask questions later situation. What really caught my attention was discovering that similar companies had lost entire contracts for workforce violations. The government takes employment law seriously when their money is involved. They don't want to work with businesses that break federal regulations, especially ones designed to protect workers. My employer was walking a tightrope they didn't seem to understand. By firing me during protected leave, they weren't just violating employment law, they were potentially breaching their contract terms. The same contract that was keeping their business alive. Government contracting officers have seen every trick in the book. They know when companies try to disguise discrimination as business restructuring. They understand the difference between legitimate business needs and convenient timing. Let's not forget that these contracts often include clauses about maintaining ethical business practices. Companies must certify they're following all applicable laws, including employment regulations. Breaking those laws while holding a federal contract, that's like telling the IRS you forgot to mention some income. The more I researched, the clearer it became. My firing wasn't just illegal under employment law, it could trigger a chain reaction that would threaten their entire business model. Armed with this knowledge, I knew exactly what my next move had to be. When you discover your employer broke federal law by firing you during maternity leave, you don't just sit there and take it. Time to fight back. First thing I did, document everything. Every email, every text message, every weird look my boss gave me when I announced my pregnancy. Sounds paranoid? Maybe, but here's the thing about wrongful termination cases. They live or die based on evidence. Companies know this. They'll delete emails faster than your teenager clears their browser history. I saved screenshots of performance reviews from before my pregnancy. Guess what they said? Exceeds expectations. Valuable team member. Critical to project success. Funny how someone goes from critical to expendable in 9 months. Right? Well, actually, it's not funny at all when you're the one getting screwed over. Then comes the big decision, filing with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. The EEOC handles discrimination complaints, and pregnancy discrimination falls right into their wheelhouse. Here's what most people don't know. You only have 180 days to file in most states. Some states give you 300 days. But why risk it? The clock starts ticking from the day you get fired, not when you figure out it was illegal. But I had something extra in my back pocket. Remember that government contract I mentioned? The one that basically kept my company's lights on? Turns out, violating federal employment laws while holding a federal contract is like robbing a bank while wearing a name tag. Not exactly subtle. My lawyer, and yes, I got one, explained something fascinating. Government contractors must follow strict workforce requirements. They can't just fire key personnel without proper justification and documentation. Losing qualified staff during protected leave? That's a contract violation waiting to happen. These contracts often include clauses about maintaining staffing levels and treating employees fairly. Break those rules, and the government can yank your contract faster than you can say wrongful termination. The lawyer dug deeper into my performance history. No disciplinary actions, no warnings, no progressive discipline of any kind. My firing looked exactly like what it was: retaliation for taking legally protected leave. Companies try to cover their tracks by creating fake performance issues after someone announces pregnancy, but they forgot to manufacture any problems for me. Rookie mistake. Here's where things get interesting. Some businesses lose major contracts instantly when found violating workforce protection laws. We're not talking about a slap on the wrist. We're talking about losing millions in revenue overnight. The federal government doesn't mess around when contractors break the rules. They have thousands of other companies ready to step in and do the work properly. Filing the EEOC complaint felt like loading a legal cannon. But what happened next? That's when the real fireworks started. The government doesn't just investigate workplace violations, they investigate everything once they start looking. And what they found at my former company was about to turn their world completely upside down. Remember how I mentioned government contracts come with strict rules? Well, turns out Uncle Sam doesn't mess around when companies break those rules. The investigation started faster than I expected. Within weeks, auditors were crawling through my former employer's files like ants at a picnic. They wanted every document, every email, every scrap of paper related to staffing decisions. The company scrambled to explain why they fired a key employee during protected leave. Their business restructuring excuse fell apart quicker than a house of cards in a windstorm. But here's where it gets interesting. The government contract wasn't just any ordinary deal. It was worth 60% of the company's annual revenue. Losing it would be like losing your biggest customer and your second biggest customer combined. Makes sense why they were sweating bullets, right? The contract termination letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. I know this because my former colleague texted me immediately. Apparently, the entire office went silent when the news broke. No more jokes about cost-cutting measures or necessary changes. Reality had smacked them right in the face. Let's not forget the ripple effects. Word spread fast in our industry. Other companies started questioning whether they wanted to work with a business that illegally fires new mothers. Professional reputation matters more than people think, especially when you're competing for government contracts. Then there's the employee exodus that followed. Turns out, I wasn't the only one who'd faced questionable treatment. 3 more women came forward with similar stories after hearing about my case. One had been passed over for promotions after announcing her pregnancy. Another faced sudden performance reviews that coincidentally started right after her maternity leave announcement. The weird part is how quickly everything unraveled. One wrongful termination complaint triggered an avalanche. The company went from celebrating their biggest contract to losing it within 2 months. They also faced potential lawsuits from multiple employees and had to explain to their board why their revenue was about to drop by millions. Well, the local business journal picked up the story. Nothing quite like public scrutiny to make companies rethink their policies. The article mentioned how small businesses often think they can bend employment laws without consequences. Spoiler alert, they can't. Other employees started reaching out to me through LinkedIn. They wanted advice about documenting workplace discrimination. Some shared their own stories of retaliation after taking family leave. It became clear this wasn't just about my situation. It was about a pattern of behavior that needed addressing. The company eventually settled with me out of court. They also implemented new policies for handling maternity leave requests. But the damage was done. Losing that government contract meant laying off half their staff within 6 months. Sometimes standing up for your rights doesn't just help you men, it helps everyone who comes after you. My former employer learned an expensive lesson about employment law, and honestly, they had it coming. The best part, I found a better job with a company that actually values working parents.